Hello, everybody, and welcome to Deep Left Field, the Toronto Stars baseball podcast. I'm Mike Wilner. It is episode 82 of Deep Left Field, and here in late October, the first one that doesn't feature any Blue Jays because, well, we're letting them settle into their off season as the League Championship Series begin. And the American League has the top two seeds, the Houston Astros and the New York Yankees. So I imagine most of the people listening to this are rooting for the giant sinkhole to open up and swallow both teams, as opposed to hoping one team or the other wins. The National League Championship Series features the 5 and 6 seeds, which got a lot of people upset earlier in the week. The Philadelphia Phillies and the San Diego Padres, because the LA Dodgers got knocked out in their first round series. The Atlanta Braves got knocked out in their first round series, though they had each had a bye, so their first round series was actually the second round. And it led to a lot of discussion about, is it fair that it's a best of 5? Were they too rusty after the break to wait out the wild card round? And if the Yankees had lost to Cleveland and they were down 2-1, then it would have gotten even louder. But now it's tough to make the argument for unfairness when you have the 1 and 2 seeds in one league getting through. Anyway, I think, look, the playoff format is what the playoff format is, and for a lot of years, the League Championship Series was a best of 5 from 1969 to 1984. The first 15 years they did it, it was a best of 5 to get to the World Series, and just the Blue Jays' luck in 1985, they expanded it to a best of 7, and that year the Jays were up 3-1 before losing to the Kansas City Royals. This week, we have 2 phenomenal guests to talk to, and we're going to get right to them. Andy Kindler and Alan Ashby. Alan Ashby, you know, of course, as the voice of the Blue Jays for 6 years, sharing the broadcast booth with Jerry Howarth and me, and just such a wonderful human being. You know, I've been so lucky to have such great people to work with. Tom Cheek, Alan Ashby, Joe Siddall, pretty much back to back to back, and I really can't tell you what incredible human beings all 3 of them are. I'm so happy to have Alan Ashby on the program, and I wanted to talk to him specifically because he played for the Houston Astros in the National League Championship Series in 1980 when it was a best of 5, and he played for the Houston Astros in the National League Championship Series in 1986 when it was a best of 7. So we wanted to do a little comparing and contrasting. And I wanted to get Andy Kindler on the program because I love him. First of all, if the name rings a bell or if you're not sure, Andy Kindler, a great comedian, a great comic actor. You or your kids have seen him on The Wizards of Waverly Place. He was on Everybody Loves Raymond. He does an annual State of the Industry speech at Just for Laughs. And he and J. Elvis Weinstein, who was a co-creator of Mystery Science Theater 2000, have their own podcast. It's called Thought Spiral. It's wonderful. Drops every Monday. Could not recommend it more highly. Just an entertaining 2-hour listen once a week. We try to keep this show well below 2 hours, but we were long with Andy and with Ashby, though not Andy Ashby. So, I mean, we're not going to get close to 2 hours, but it's longer than an hour, which is where we try to keep it. Anyway, I wanted to talk to Andy, not just because he's hilarious, but because he's a big baseball fan who really got back into baseball this year, and he grew up in Queens, so he's a big Mets fan. And I thought, you know what, the Mets, with their 101 wins, don't win the division, go to the wild card round, lose in the first round. In one of the games, they got 1 hit. I thought it would be interesting to get the Mets fan perspective versus the Blue Jays fan perspective on what went on in that first round, though that was the intent. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about a bunch of other stuff a lot more. So without further ado, this is a wonderful show, 2 wonderful guests, and let's get right to it. First up, to talk about his New York Mets, here's Andy Kindler. Andy, it is wonderful to have you here. I'm so excited to get to talk a little bit of baseball with you. But first things first is I want to send your memory back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, whatever, to when you came on in the studio with me for a Blue Jays talk.
Yes.
And we talked about your Mets memories for half an hour, and you read the disclaimer.
Yes.
I found it on YouTube.
Are you talking about any reproduction or other use of the pictures, descriptions, and accounts of this game without the express written consent of Major League? Is it Major League Baseball?
It is.
It's prohibited.
Strictly.
It's prohibited.
Strictly.
Like, in other words, you're a little kid. Don't just take your little give a show projector. And even that, don't take anything from this game.
Yeah.
And also, I've more solidified it now because I watched the Mets this year. But so I'm getting all the memories. Lindsey Nelson, Ralph Kiner, and Bob Murphy, ladies and gentlemen. Kiner's Corner.
Ralph Kiner,
Come on.
The old ball player for the Pirates and the broadcaster for the Mets.
He had like 500 home runs, right?
I think so, yeah. He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
He's the one who very famously said on a broadcast, it's Mother's Day today, so happy birthday to all the moms out there.
That's pretty good.
That's not bad.
That's pretty good. Oh, like we couldn't say that ever. I probably have only said that on Mother's Day.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to talk to you because you got, I listened to your podcast, Thought Spiral, with J. Elvis Weinstein. And
Thank you, everybody.
It's a great listen. I highly recommend it to everyone. And you've talked about how you got back into the Mets this year, how you were a Mets fan growing up in Queens. And I thought...
And that they won on October 16th, 1969. They won the World Series on my birthday in 1969. You know this already, so I'm sorry.
I was busy gestating.
Back to you, Mike.
I was gestating at the time. But
okay.
But that's a hell of a birthday gift, I got to tell you. But I kind of wanted to be able to, pick your brain and commiserate with you and about the Mets and about... here on this side of the border, the Blue Jays. The Mets won 101 games and were in control of the National League East for most of the season, but wound up in the wild card round and only played one more game than the Jays did, and it was pretty devastating up here. What was it like for you?
Oh, it was horrible. No, actually, I remember being afraid to talk to you because you were going to be even sadder. Because I didn't even watch that game. All I know was that the Jays were up 15-1.
Yeah, 27-2.
17-2.
Yeah.
93-4. And then the other team started scoring touchdowns. So I was like, I was having trouble surviving my own thing. But you see, my whole thing is different because I realize now I'm in therapy for like 5 or 6 years. And I realize now that my dad had season tickets to the Jet games. And it was an amazing thing. But my family is very negative and judgmental. So like, I remember when I was a kid, I'd have to fight. And I love Joe Namath. And they go, he's staying. Look at all the interceptions. This is exactly what I realized is why I can't watch sports this way. It was a revelation. I said to myself, I don't really know what's going to happen on this next pitch. I really don't know. But the way I used to watch was they're going to strike out. He's going to fucking blow it. He's going to, it's like watching with this thing of like unrealistic, the worst. It's not like I hate, it's like Bill Murray once said, they were booing in Chicago, the Cubs. And he goes, why don't you boo yourself? He's saying to the audience, to the crowd. Right? Boo yourself. I'm kind of like that. I don't want to get mad at my team, but so I'm trying to shake my parents' upbringing. And but I ran around the house. I'm never going to watch it again. But that only lasted like about 7 hours. Now, was it more crushing for you?
I mean, I guess we talked about this a lot last week on the program. We had Ross Stripling, who was a pitcher in the Jays rotation, and a couple of Canadian TV stars here, Paul Lee.
I know that name.
Oh, Stripling?
Russ Stripling?
Yeah, he pitched for the Dodgers because you're in LA.
Oh.
And now he pitched for the Jays. But Paul Lee from Kim's Convenience and Aaron Abrams from Children Ruin Everything. And we talked about fandom and angry versus sad.
Right.
And, there are a lot of fans who fan by getting angry. And that's the way they are sports fans, and I'll never understand that. For me, it's more sad. And you know what? For the Jays, in that game too, where, it was 8-1 is going to live forever in Toronto sports now. It was great that the fans didn't turn on them. I mean, I think they were more
That's great.
stunned
That is
and
great.
numb than anything,
Stunned.
right?
Right.
But when you're watching your team with 101 wins,
Why are the Jets booing? Why are they booing? Who are they booing? Was it Scherzer, or it sounded like they were booing DeGrom? And then people online, and here's the thing, 7 or 8 years from now, we'll be able to have another discussion where I'll know all of the current names,
Right.
or many of the current names. But I get all these things online. First of all, I get some critics, like they're baseball critics. And they say like, what was he putting Darren Ruff in there for? What is he crazy? And then I start to go, it's not. And he goes, the fans aren't booing Scherzer. They're booing the front office.
it's a new front office, right? Billy Epler is new this year. Steve Cohen's the new owner with all kinds of money. And I don't know if they're booing there. Maybe they're booing Scherzer and DeGrom.
Or Buck. They don't like Buck Showalter. He's famous for making the worst decisions or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what these people, is he?
Blue Jays fans will remember when Buck Showalter in the 2016 wildcard game left his best pitcher in the bullpen in extra innings, and the Jays
Maybe he
walked it
wasn't
off.
feeling well. Maybe he bet on the game. Don't you ever think of these things in the most positive way possible? Okay, so I don't know anything about Buck Showalter. All I know is he's like my age, because I just turned 66. I think he's exactly my age. And I started to read his biography. He was a minor league player. He never got to the major. So this is a guy like I want to root for. He's got a kindly face. Every time Starling Marte leaves, they do a thing in the thing. So I start to like first of all, regardless of Buck Showalter, I love the Mets players. I was talking to my wife about that. How can you not root against? How can you not love the guy who chokes up? Who's the guy who was McNeil?
Jeff McNeil,
McNeil,
the batting coach. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they have great people on the team, but of course I'm a Mets fan. And I do think they have the best, and I think you might agree with me, they have the funniest announcing crew I've heard in a long time.
I know you love those guys.
It's not Gary Apple. I called him Gary Apple.
Gary Cohen.
Gary Cohen. And Ron Darling is great with Keith Hernandez. So this is the greatest announcing crew. And Keith Hernandez got injured. He almost died falling. This guy was not on the injured reserve list. He says for the first 12 years, he can't negotiate a cup of coffee to a curb. Right? He falls. He decides I know what happens. I got to hold on to this coffee. Ba-boom. Right?
Sure. You want to protect your
Can't
phone
lose the
and your coffee and you break your shoulder.
Oh, no, the phone.
Yeah. Keith Hernandez got hurt and had to miss.
What do you think of that? But do you think I'm a homer, or do you like their crew?
I think you're always going to like your crew, right? I think I think they're. I mean, Gary Cohen's a legend, and Ron Darling's done some great work. I haven't heard them on Mets games. I'm kind of partial to my guys. I think Danny Schulman is the best in the business, but having a really good crew, and having been in those booths and really enjoyed what we did too. But you have to love your home guys. I think everybody does.
What's the scene in Toronto right now? Like, I would like to hear that the city is cool. Because Toronto, but here's the other thing. Someone told me my brother would not allow his kids, this is a true story, would not allow his kids to root for the Mets. He forbade them.
He was a Yankee fan?
No. My brother was with me at the Mets World Series Game 4. But he thought if his kids were Mets fans, they would undergo too much pain and suffering. But someone pointed out online, if you're not a Mets fan, then you don't. What you learn from being a Mets fan is that life is not working out going to be good for you. Life is not a good thing, and if you can't shield kids from that forever.
I think
that was really
you
fun.
learned that from being a Leaf fan here in Toronto. That's what we get, and I think that Toronto is sort of cool now. As far as the Jays' loss is concerned, because hockey season has started, basketball season is starting. So it's still a hockey town, but I think that Jays' loss is going to be right there with the Leafs' loss a few years ago when they were up 4-1 with 10 minutes left in the third period against Boston in Game 7. No one will ever forget that.
This is unbelievable that you say this. I won't ever forget it because I flew into Toronto that night.
The Boston game?
I flew into, maybe I'm missing it, but I remember I flew into Toronto. They were up by a few goals, and then by the time I got to the hotel, they had lost. The Blue Jays, here's the other thing. The Blue Jays have a great reputation, don't they, as a team?
Well, thank you. I mean, how do you mean?
I know that they, like, unlike the Expos, I know it just seemed like they always supported, because the Expos, the rumor was that no one came there, and they broadcast the games in French.
They also didn't have radio.
People,
yeah.
they didn't have radio.
Yeah, they broadcast the games on the internet. For at the end there.
Quel dommage.
Quel dommage is right. Yeah, a little French from Andy Kindler. We love it. But yeah, it's true.
So, but Toronto always had a difference.
Yeah, when
right?
Major League Baseball pulled the rug out from the Expos, I think people really stopped showing up. I mean, I remember being at a game against the Jays their last year or two where there were 3,500 people in the building, and it was awful. But, you know, the Jays were pretty mediocre for a very long time, but we never saw like 8,700 or anything like that. There was 11,000 on a Monday night, but whatever. But yeah, they're well supported, and certainly, you know, they were the first team ever to draw 4 million back-to-back seasons in '92 and '93, which was awesome. Here,
you have how many World Series? One World
Series?
Two
back-to-back. Thank you, in '92 and '93.
I didn't thank you. I didn't say good job.
Yeah, well, you're welcome.
You want to do it now? Great job.
I had nothing to do with it, but thank you. Yeah, they beat Atlanta in '92 and then the Phillies in '93. And that's it.
Wow. And that's it. But that's enough. That's enough. Now, the same thing with me. The Mets won in '69 and the Mets won in '86, which I didn't even understand how. I think it was in a closet because I knew it was over. I was watching from my mother's closet or somebody's closet. The ball had to go over
the
under
Buckner,
yeah, all that stuff. And because Boston had never won, I had no image or care that Boston had never won before then. In the mid-'80s, you didn't have as much sympathy for Boston.
Tell me the story, Andy Kindler, that I've heard before of you going to the apartment of this nondescript Mets reliever in the '60s.
Oh, yeah. All right, so it was my friend, I think it was William Alexander. My friend William Alexander and I, we loved the Mets. And so we wanted to get an autograph. We found out where Jerry Arrigo lived. Jerry Arrigo. He was a pitcher for the Mets.
Okay.
And he lived in this place called Le Havre, which was near me in Queens, which was like a place that had all these nondescript apartment buildings. It was very strange looking. We knock on his door. He opens the door, and we say, he's more surprised than us why this doesn't happen to him a lot. And people come to his apartment. But he was very, very nice, and he signed our things. He did look a little surprised. But first of all, that couldn't happen today. I'm not knocking on Jerry Arrigo's or any professional player's door today, right?
Yeah, like you wouldn't be able to find them. But I mean, Jerry, like, I think what struck me about this story was that Jerry Arrigo, like, pitched half a season for the Mets in 1966, and he wasn't especially good. Why'd you pick him?
Because we knew we could get the autograph. We knew he would sign.
Yeah, no kidding.
We figured he'd sign. Well, also, there were no other Mets.
He was a Met for 3 months.
Wait, so he was a Met from when to when?
From May 20th, 1966 to August 16th, 1966.
Okay, so now I'm able now to be able to remember my traumas and how old I was. I was 10 years old. I remember this day. He's looking around. I go, "You want?" It wasn't like a bit where he goes, "You want my autograph?" But it just was like, it wasn't a usual thing for him. How did I know? It must have gone through the community like wildfire in Le Havre, right? Jerry Arrigo's there.
But was not the second question, who the hell is Jerry Arrigo?
No, not with us. Not with us because, well, first of all, the thing about Mets fans is that, first of all, my Grandpa Herman, would torture me because he was a Yankee fan, torture me. So he would torture me by how good the Yankees were, and then he would torture me with this bit that he thought was funny. And now starting for the New York Mets, Andy Kindler. He'd do that bit. So when you're a Mets fan, you're already feeling bad, but you're also feeling great because you had Casey Stengel and you were kind of an amazing Mets. So we were just, I think, a different breed of fan, is what I'm going to say. My thing was, why was my thing? My thing was not nearly as depressing as yours.
Why was your
my
thing
was
not?
like,
you won 100 games.
I guess it's just because we didn't have, I'm only basing it on the fact that we weren't up 9-1 or something like that. 8-1.
8-1, yeah.
To me, that's the type, that was the type of thing. It'll be like, that's what I want to change about myself. And I think I can change it. If you root like, how could you blow that lead? You're going to have misery for the rest of your life. And I want to be I want to be a nice fan.
Just as a more zen fan?
Well, it's like, first of all, I already make fun. I'm already in trouble for talking about other comedians and all this kind of stuff. But when I used to go to the game, I'd be like, maybe when I was like 12, I would yell. But now it's like, I don't want any trouble. The guy likes that team. Fine. You like the Braves? I'm not going to get. But with this thing, it's not fun anymore. It used to be.
Here's a question, because I mean, as someone who took calls after the game for 17 years from people, and people who are obviously angry and upset are much more inclined to call a post-game radio show than people who think things are fine and good.
That's so. Yeah.
Does it take away from your passion or your emotion or your excitement to work at not getting angry?
Well, here's the thing. Like, sometimes you need it. I don't know why I hate Nick Saban, but I hate him. Hate. I can't stand his stupid face. Like, okay? So that is a motivator that makes me want to root against Alabama. So I have to have it for college football. For college, and my father went to Indiana. I'll always root for Indiana. I have to be able to root for someone to enjoy sports. I think the idea that you're just going to be sitting there, sipping wine, going, well, that was a wonderful thing, and the other thing. No, you have to root. I think it's just a degree. I need to root a little bit less because if I was a player, I wouldn't want me looking at me.
But if you were rooting, can you root as much but not let it make you angry and just sort of?
I made a big thing this year. This was a big, what is it called when light bulb went off? I was assuming the negative of every pitch for my team. And so if they did something great, but why am I doing that? That's literally not true, what I'm saying. I don't know that the Mets are going to blow it again. No, I don't know that the Mets are going to blow it. I don't know that the Jays are going to blow it. Because you look at these things, there's every conceivable team has had every conceivable lead and have lost this lead. There's no team that you can go, well, you can never, I guess maybe the old Yankees or something, you go, well, they'll never blow a lead. Or maybe even then, there's no way you could say they should never have blown that lead. But when you had the lead, I just imagined your head exploding when it started.
I think we were all just numb, sort of shocked. And, it was 8-1, sure, but it was still 9-5 in the eighth inning. You had 6 outs to get with a 4-run lead. And, but
were there errors and stuff?
There was a ball that a little bloop Texas League duck snort, whatever you want to call it.
It's not a can of corn, right?
No, can of corn gets caught. No, so this was like a little duck snort into shallow center field that couldn't have been placed there any better if the hitter had done that, and the shortstop and the center fielder collided. That ball falls. That play happens once out of every 1,000
That's right.
times you do that, right? So what can you do except just sort of shake your head?
Yeah.
All right, so before I let you go,
sure.
your 101 win Mets go out in the first round. You live in L.A., the pride of Sherman Oaks, and so all of a sudden I see now you're talking about how you're going to root for the Padres. Is that the deal now?
Well, I first said, first of all, because I haven't watched sports in a long time, so I was enraged that the Padres were shushing the Mets fan. I don't like it. Now, I guess they all do it now, but I was like, I will never root for the Padres, and they will never win a World Series. I'm from a city that has a World Series. They will never win a World Series. And then I started to root for them against the Dodgers. I just like them. Did you ever hear about the April Fool's joke that they played on Tommy Lasorda? I will never forget this. I remember watching when it happened. They decided to tell Tommy Lasorda that after the third foul off, if someone fouled something, after the third one, it was a strikeout. So they just passed that law that if you the third foul that goes out of the bounds, you lose. He blew a gasket. He couldn't fucking believe it. That's the part of the game. And then they finally told him. But I thought that was what a great way to prank him.
I could see that. Yeah, that would be pretty hilarious. Tommy Lasorda
Because
blowing a gasket.
people do get tired of the but people do get tired. I like the long. When I was a kid, I didn't like them. Now I'm more, because I'm such an expert now. I can tell the cutter goes like that and the other thing goes the other way. Now I know. I'm very sophisticated.
Yes, you are. That's why we brought you on here to join us in Deep Left Field. This was an absolute blast. I don't know how much we talked about what we planned to, but that's even better. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.
No, I love.
Thank you, Mike. I love spending time with you.
I appreciate it so much. That's Andy Kindler, and I hope he really wasn't just saying that, because it meant a lot to me. It was just a wonderful conversation. A lot of it wound up for time on the cutting room floor, but the stuff that you got, I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. He's tremendous, and it's always great to have someone come back to baseball. And he wasn't paying that much attention for a long time. Really got into the Mets in a very heartbreaking end of the season for New York Mets fans, but with Steve Cohen in charge and opening up his checkbook, you would imagine that the Mets are going to be a force to be reckoned with again for a long time in the National League East. Alan Ashby is next. We'll be right back. You're in Deep Left Field. My name is Mike Wilner. So appreciate having you here. The Blue Jays are done for the year, but we are not. Deep Left Field will be here every week of the offseason, all the way to spring training, baseball or no baseball. We are here for you, and there'll be a little bit more diversity in our guest list over the course of the offseason because we don't have Ross Stripling every week. It's weird. This feels weird because this is like the first time since, May that I haven't had that weekly discussion with Ross Stripling. He missed 1 week of the season doing long toss with Ross. We will have him back in the offseason. Hopefully we'll have him back to talk about re-signing with the Blue Jays as a free agent, though I don't think the odds of that are especially strong. Regardless, we will check in with Ross, but it's weird not talking to him for a week. I miss him. I'm sure you guys do too. What I don't want you to miss is the opportunity to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcatcher. That way you don't have to come looking for us. We are right there in your inbox every week. If you can take a second to give us a review on Apple Podcasts, would love to see 5 stars from you. And if you got a couple of minutes, leave a review. I really do enjoy reading the reviews. So if you've got a couple of minutes, a review on Apple Podcast would be absolutely lovely. I want as many people as possible to know about this venture as we move into what would be the second half of a baseball season this week with episode 82. My next guest and my final guest is someone who I had the privilege to share a broadcast booth with for 6 years. He was a catcher on the 1977 Toronto Blue Jays, but he really made his mark with the Houston Astros after the Jays traded him in 78. And he spent the next decade with the Astros, made it to the playoffs 3 times. And that's what I wanted to talk about. But I also wanted to catch up because if you guys were listening to Blue Jays broadcasts back then, he was there till 2012. Then I'm sure you miss Alan Ashby as much as I miss Alan Ashby. So let's get right to it. Here's my conversation about playoff formats and so much more with former Blue Jay and former Blue Jay broadcaster, Alan Ashby. Alan, it is so great to have you. And as I say that, I recall that up here in Toronto, we were the only ones who called you Alan. The rest of everybody called you Ash. And I blame that on Nelson Millman, I think, because that's our program director, the guy who brought us both on to the Jays broadcast. That's how he introduced you to us. So I've called you Alan for the 16 years that I've known you. So I apologize in advance for that and in the past for that. But thank you so much for joining me. It's so good to be talking to you where people can hear us again.
Well, the way I'm referred to is segmented in society. I can certainly say that. My wife doesn't call me Ash. I can assure you that one. But I think it was actually, it could have been Nelson Millman, who I have great thanks to for even kind of reviving a dead career at that point for me, and a good guy on top of all of that. But I think it might have been my partner who, when I said, hey, here's the way I'd like to be referred to, that might have said otherwise. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know about that one. And certainly if you said it to me, I would have called you Ash the whole time. But either way, Alan Ashby, it's great to have you here on Deep Left Field. I told you I wouldn't embarrass you, but I might as well. I mean, look, I had the privilege of working with Tom Cheek for only 2.5 years before he got sick, and he was such a wonderful gentleman and an absolute champion for me in that booth, and such an incredible pleasure to work with. I could never have imagined that would have gotten. I would have ever had anything like that again, and I did with you for 6 years. I could not have asked for a better. And I don't want to say partner because I was here and you were here, but someone better in that booth as a human, as a broadcaster, as everything. So thank you for every second of the 6 years that we spent together in the Blue Jays booth.
My comment is, wow, that's just so nice of you, Mike. I would repeat everything back at you. I enjoyed every moment. I learned so much from you. You're one of those rare guys, from my perspective, who lives and dies not only Blue Jays but baseball, and you knew what was going on at all times, and it motivated me a great deal. I found myself listening constantly, trying to make sure I was picking up everything I could from you and from Jerry, and it was such a great experience for me, the 6 years I spent in Toronto and working with you and with Blue Jays. And so back at you, my friend.
Wow, far too kind. All right, I didn't bring you on here to tell you how great you were, though.
Well, then we're done, then, right?
That's right. Or to hear it from you, which was thank you so much. But I had no idea that you learned stuff from me. That's
goodness,
that's awesome. But I did want to talk to you about this raging controversy across baseball that has quieted down a little bit over the last couple of days. I think if the Yankees had lost to Cleveland, that's all we would be hearing about how the best of five is unfair and how, the top seeds, the Dodgers are gone, 111 wins, and the 5 and 6 have moved on to the National League Championship Series because the best of five is so unfair and everything should be a best of 7. You're someone, and there aren't a lot, who actually played in a best of 5 National League Championship Series and played in a best of 7 National League Championship Series. You played in the best of 5 in 1980 with the Astros, the best of 7 in 1986 with the Astros. So I guess without putting too fine a point on it, is there a huge difference between the best of 5 and the best of 7 in your mind? From was 86, man, this is a lot different than 80 and 81 when you played in that strike makeup division series thing that was a best of 5.
I think from that player's perspective, you have blinders on a great deal. You go out and you play tonight's game, and maybe I was just limited in my field of thinking, my scope at that time. But it was about tonight's game, and obviously you're trying to win the series and go on and play in the World Series, every player's dream. But I think to answer your question directly, I think it's a huge difference. Can be, not always though, and I can probably reflect back to some examples that would say why it was or wasn't. You can always point to different examples that provide different perspectives. But to me, momentum is a funny thing in baseball. People talk about momentum. This team is clearly on a great run right now. And you can go from 10 wins in a row to 5 losses in a row so fast in Major League Baseball that it really is impossible to put your finger on why that may be taking place or has taken place. Or you and I were talking earlier about runs for ball clubs. Why were the Blue Jays so good this year? And they were great for 2 weeks, and then they weren't so good for 2 weeks. But that's the makeup of a Major League season. We all know that. And 162 in terms of games played is just so vast. I don't think that you could look at any great, well, maybe not always true, but great teams tend to not have long losing streaks. And I think it's not so much about the winning streaks a lot of times, but staying away from the long spells of playing bad baseball. But what really changes things when you get to a postseason, and especially a 5-game, is that one pitcher that's either great or red hot. And I do think momentum does carry over for a pitcher, sometimes for a given hitter. But for one team to stay hot from one night to the next, when you score 11 runs on one night and win 11-1, and then you get blown out and get 2 hits the next day, how do you explain? There really is no explanation. But when you have a pitcher, and you can look at so many examples, but I was broadcasting for an Astros team back in the 90s, 98, I think. Randy Johnson came on a half a season for that club, and it was really a great club in terms of talent. But Randy Johnson came on from Seattle and had a half of a season of baseball that was so electric. It was so off the charts. And you thought, as the heavily favored Astros moved into the postseason and they were going to face the San Diego Padres, that the Astros had a huge advantage. And yet the Padres were led by a Kevin Brown, who had electric stuff of his own. And when it got to that series, though Randy Johnson was really good and didn't do anything to change that momentum direction, Kevin Brown took over. And in that 5-game series, he dominated, and the Padres went to the World Series. And so sometimes I think that we can take the big name as the guy that's going to lead this club. And sometimes it has anything to do with anything but the big name. It's this balance of talent that a team has, but led by one pitcher. Often is the case. We saw Kansas City Royals club some years back dominate because of its bullpen. They would throw starting pitchers out there for as brief a period as they could throw them out there, and then run 100 miles an hour one after another from the bullpen. And so there are different phases of a team's talent that can be utilized to win a short or long series, for that matter, or a season. But I think a season is tougher in terms of those bullpen guys because they do wear down at some point. But yeah, I played in '86 that you mentioned with the Astros playing against the Mets. And we had Mike Scott and Nolan Ryan, but Mike Scott was kind of the flavor of the day at that time. And the New York Mets, all you heard around there as he won his first 2 starts was the Mets do not want to go to game, I guess that was a 7.
Yeah.
Game 7, because Mike Scott was going to come back for game 7. They don't want to see Mike Scott. They don't want game 7. And they did win. And I think they felt like they had to win on game 6, because in a 7-game series, that starting pitcher can go 3 times. Well, in a 5-game series, that starting pitcher like Kevin Brown, Kevin Brown might have pitched in 3 games. I don't even recall, because of the spacing of the games in a short series. Sometimes you enable a team to run 2 starting pitchers out there, and that's all they need. And so, long answer for, is there a difference? But there is a difference. It's just, I think a lot of it has to do with spacing. And I think Major League Baseball has addressed that spacing of off days in terms of postseason series, so that advantage doesn't be taken too much advantage of. But that short series is really tough if one club has a pitcher who's hot.
Yeah, and that's an interesting perspective, because I never thought about that as far as just starting pitching is concerned. And I'm looking up that 98 DS right now to just see what Kevin Brown did. He did start twice because it ended in 4, but he gave up 1 run in 14 and 2/3 innings. So yeah, that's about as dominant as you can get. Randy Johnson started twice and gave up 4 runs in 14 innings. 3 of them were earned. So he had an ERA of 1.93, and Kevin Brown had an ERA of 0.61. So you had 2 great pitchers winning 2 or battling twice, and Kevin Brown just winding up on top by a run each time.
And I think they were head up, and that nullified the Astros' great pitcher in Randy Johnson at that time. So you go into a series and you think, well, gee, there's no way the Astros can lose with Randy Johnson starting a couple of games. But they did because Kevin Brown outdueled him. And Randy did nothing wrong.
No, Brown pitched. Brown and Johnson pitched against each other in Game 1, but then because of the spacing, Brown was able to come back and start Game 3, and Randy pitched Game 4. So
so they didn't go half twice, but yeah, okay.
But did he come back on 2 days rest? I mean, that's weird. Anyway, too much of me looking up stuff. Game 1 was on the 29th, and Game 2 was on the 3rd. So Brown pitched on 3 days rest, and Randy didn't. And San Diego made that choice when the series was 1-1 to go back to Brown on short rest, maybe so they could bring him back in Game 5 if they needed to.
Did he pitch in Game 5? Oh, they obviously 4 games, yeah. And I do think that was part of the whole deal. I think Kevin Brown was lining up to, if not start, at least pitch in Game 5. And so, So to me, that's the biggest difference in the shorter the series, the more one pitcher can dominate. It's hard for, I'm not saying it can't take place, and it does take place, but for a Jeff Bagwell, for example, to have a series where you go, wow, well, he just dominated the series and this club won and whatever it may be. It does happen, but it's not as much on the minds, certainly, of the players going into a series about, oh, my gosh, we're going to have to face so-and-so at least a couple of games in this series, and that's going to be really tough. And I think that changes the psyche of the club going up against that particular guy.
Well, I think, and you lived that, as you mentioned, in 1986. And I remember you were playing in the series. I'm 16 years old watching it. And I remember all the talk about, man, they don't want to face Mike Scott. They better win this in 6. Mike Scott's going to destroy him in Game 7, just like he did in 1 and 4. And, I've always said that baseball's not a game you can win with urgency, or you can win by wanting it more or anything like that. But
and you're exactly right.
But the fact remains that the Mets were they felt like Game 6 was their Game 7 of that series.
I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. The Mets, by the way, were one of the great rosters you will find. I think anytime, any club you want to look up, that was one of the great rosters. Although I will say the 98 version of the Astros, and look at some of the numbers those guys were putting up in that particular era of baseball. But yeah, that Met club, man, all the names that you can name on that club, and I could start rattling them off, but they were just phenomenal. And then they would throw Dwight Gooden at you, and it was like it doesn't really matter how many runs they pile up, because you're going to be lucky to get some base runners.
Yeah, but meanwhile, it was a 3-2 series going into Game 6 where you guys had a real chance of winning Game 7. But yeah, some of those names, sure, Gary Carter, Keith Hernandez, Darryl Strawberry, John Gibbons. That was a
John
was a great
Gibbons
Mets
was
team.
the difference maker on that club for them, by the way. And I jest and you jest because we love John. Yeah, the 2-time manager for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, that's right. We do love Gibby, and he talks about being in the bullpen for that series. But you know what? When you said it's rare that a hitter can take over a series like that, my mind immediately goes to Mark Lemke with the Braves, who's a punch and Judy hitter over the course of the season, who had some great league championship series, but he didn't dominate. I think he was just like way better than they thought he was going to be.
He is.
But then I thought
he is Mr. October 3rd.
Right. Yeah. And then, but Will Clark, do you remember Will Clark in 89 in that Giants Cubs series? And I had to look it up because I thought he hit 700 and something, but he hit 650 in that best of 5. And Will Clark and Jeffrey Leonard just basically took over, and it's something that that was a rare. It is a very rare thing for hitters. So you were down 3-2, obviously, because you lost in 6 in 1986 in that great 16-inning game that was the finale. But then in 1980, in that best of 5 against the Phillies, not only were you up 2-1, so you had a chance to close it out.
In the Astrodome, where we didn't lose.
Right. In the Astrodome, where you didn't lose. And at that time, it was the first 2 at the lower seed and the last 3 at the higher seed. So the first 2 games were in Philly. So you had 2 shots to close it out with your 2-1 lead in Game 4 and Game 5. But something I didn't remember is that each of the last 4 games of that series went to extra innings. So this was an incredibly tight and close series between you guys and the eventual World Series champions.
We led in each of the Game 4 and Game 5 performances late in the game. One of those games being pitched by Vern Rule, and there was just the strangest play, and I'll get into that just a second, and one by Nolan Ryan. And we felt like we had the series won, and the Phillies wound up beating us, to their credit, and they won the World Series. In 86, it was the Mets beating us, and they went on to win the World Series. And I think that may have been the case in 81.
And 81, the Dodgers beat you and won the World Series.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were very close. People ask me all the time, how many World Series did you play in? It just never happened. And, quick story on that one. When I met up with Nolan Ryan, as he became my teammate, he talked about this weird phenomenon in his career that he came up with the Mets, and in 1969 went to the World Series in his first season with the Mets, and it never happened again. And I don't recall how many seasons he pitched, but I think it was somewhere near 73 or something like that. And
I think he pitched 106 years in the major league.
But it's great players lead teams to greatness. Yeah, but sometimes it's luck, quirk of the draw, whatever it may be. But it's an odd bag out there.
Tell me about the weird play in the Vern Rule game. Rule is a guy I always remember, and obviously you have the hands-on experience. But I remember he was the guy who took over for J.R. Richard.
That's correct.
Or moved into the rotation when Richard had his stroke.
Yep.
Man, imagine how good you guys would have been if J.R. had.
We lost J.R. Richard, Joe Sambito, our ace out of the bullpen, and I believe Dickie Thon all in that season. And
Dickie got hit in the face with a pitch. Yeah.
Right. From Mike Torres. I don't know why that suddenly comes to mind, but we lost some enormous talent that year and still wound up in that position. We probably were fortunate in doing so. But Vern Rule was a curveball pitcher, didn't have much of a fastball, command kind of a guy. Anyway, late in the ball game, and I couldn't tell you 8th inning, wherever it took place, there were a couple of runners on base for Philadelphia, maybe bases loaded. I don't recall exactly, but somebody hit a little, whether it was a bunt or a swinging kind of little pop-up in front of the mound. Ball probably didn't go 10 feet in the air. And so it's one of those little flare kind of things. And Vern Rule comes up and tries to catch it. And as it turned out, and now I need to, I don't think I'm going to recoup the memory, but there was nobody out at the time. And Vern winds up with the base runners not knowing what to do. Did he catch it? Did he trap it? Umpires were completely confused. So Vern kind of catches this little trap job off the end of the glove and turns and makes what we believe, and there's no way around it, was a triple play. And we were out of the inning. But the umpires confer because David Johnson, the manager, or so it was Phillies. Manager comes out, starts arguing.
Dallas Green.
So nobody knows what happened. Did he catch it? No, he didn't. Yes, he did. Was it a triple play or was it 1 out? Those were the only possibilities, a triple play or 1 out on the play, based on what the runners did and what the umpires called. And so the umpires conferred and obviously came away with the conclusion that it was a double play and left a runner on base. There was no possibility of a double play on the play. So if you ever wind up looking up the mess that happened on that, you'll probably get a better read than what I'm telling you. But all I can tell you for certain is there were runners on base, nobody out, and the play should have been a triple play. And we got 2 outs out of it, and they may have wound up scoring in that inning. I don't recall. I think they probably did, because that's kind of the way that series went. The next game, Nolan Ryan had a lead in the 8th inning or maybe even 9th, and the Phillies wound up coming back and tying and winning the ball game. And it was just kind of one of those, if you were on the other side of things, if you were eating a Philly cheesesteak, you probably said fate's on our side, you know.
Well, the only thing I could find is in the top of the 4th inning of that game 4, with runners at first and second, it just says Gary Maddox hit into a line drive double play pitcher to first.
Well, that must be
base.
the play. So my mind says it was more crucial late in the ball game. But did they wind up scoring after that? And it was anything but a line drive.
Yeah, I'm sure. They did not score in that. They didn't score until the 8th, but it was equally crazy in the 8th because, and maybe this will jog your memory, maybe it won't, no pressure, but they had already scored 1 run, and it was 2-1 for you guys, and Dave Smith came into the game to pitch to Mike Schmidt, and the game reads, Mike Schmidt hit a single to second base that scored the tying run, but no outs were recorded on the play.
Yeah, Mike was always dangerous with that infield single.
yeah, that was his thing, for sure.
You clear it up with the 4th inning, so. But it was just a strange game and series as it turned out, the way things wound up working on that.
Yeah, and to lose in extra innings twice.
Yeah.
At
the Astrodome,
and to have Nolan give it up the way he did. The Astros were leading 5-2 going into the 8th, and the Phillies scored 5 runs. They, I'm sure, knocked Nolan out of the game.
There was a pinch hitter. Bob Boone came up as a pinch hitter, and it was a scenario that wound up eventually costing Bill Verdon his job. I think as things turned out, he wound up facing Bob Boone, who was really not a high number hitter at the time, and he wound up hitting a little jam shot flare into center field, as I recall, that's plated a couple of runs and maybe even tied the game at the time. I don't recall exactly, but Verdon had a chance to walk him and face the pitcher spot.
Manny Trio.
Yeah. And I think in retrospect, just at face value, I would have faced Bob Boone and not Manny Trio at that time. But it was, controversy has to swirl around everything that does or doesn't go right.
Of course. And then you guys tie it up in the bottom of the inning, but Frank LaCourte gives up the ribby double in the 10th.
To the LaCourte family, I'll just let you know it's LaCourte.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I've always thought it was LaCourte, but for the LaCourtes, I'm sorry, Frank, and all the LaCourtes who are listening, and equally sorry for bringing up the fact that he gave it up in the 10th inning. So it's cool that we're talking about these things. You didn't go into it with a different mindset in '86, right? Because, hey, This is a best of 7 this time.
No, in fact, I don't even think we went in with the media mindset and the fan mindset that said the Mets were way better than us. It just didn't, we felt like we could play the Mets. Even in game 6 that the Mets came back, they were trailing in the 8th or 9th inning, whichever it was.
In the 9th, yeah.
In the 9th inning, and there was a fly ball to deep center, right center, that Billy Hatcher was our center fielder at the time, and he really wasn't. He was more our left fielder, but it wound up getting over his head and started kind of the mess. I don't know that it was the leadoff hitter or one of the first few hitters in the inning, but crucial play in that ball game. And,
Lenny Dykstra led off the inning with a triple.
Okay, so that would be the one to right center or to center field.
To center,
yeah. It was fly ball that. Yeah, I don't. No finger pointing. It was a crucial play, as it turned out, and it started the mess. And
it's funny because when you look back at that and you put it in the framework of today's game, Bob Knepper started that game and was still out there in the 9th inning, which would never happen today.
Yeah. They didn't know all the things we know today back then.
Right.
I had Mike Scott on when I was still broadcasting and asked him about that very point. Do you think that today's world of 100 pitches or whatever the magic number is for any given organization is the magic number for saving an arm. And his quick answer was no. And of course, ball players are always right in their assessments about what's going on. But, it's just Nolan Ryan was out of his mind with this all of a sudden 100 pitch count that was put on him that was pulling him out of some games in the fourth inning.
Sure, because Nolan was,
Yeah.
He used a lot of pitches.
There are a lot of players from previous generations who have no chance at the all-time strikeout record that they would just totally disagree with,
Yeah.
Totally disagree with.
I'm sure you caught 150 pitches from Nolan Ryan in games more than once.
Oh, that was a tidy performance. Yeah, I was thinking about this difference between postseason and regular season and about one pitcher. And I talked about Kevin Brown and Randy Johnson and of course we had some great performances from the Rocket, Roger Clemens and so many, Mike Scott and Ryan and on and on. But I want to say the early 70s, the Phillies had a chap by the name of Steve Carlton, who won 27 games one year when the Phillies won, I believe, 59 games. And
sounds right.
So he was that good, and yet the Phillies won only 59 games. So that one pitcher, what impact does he have on a bad team?
Well, I mean, you were here, right, when Roy Halladay was. The Jays would win 78% of Doc's games and 43% of the rest of them.
Well, and that's fantastic. And it says, wow, this guy was really good, as was Steve Carlton. But it doesn't have that great impact on a team that's mediocre to poor. And yet, if that team somehow found its way, Philadelphia Phillies, into the postseason and got a chance to start winning, they're the low seed right now that's still alive, and they now are in the captain's seat with a win last night. That one pitcher can make a huge difference, whereas in that 162 marathon, it's nice, it's great, but it just isn't going to change the tide.
Yeah, if you've got a best of 5 where you can guarantee almost, because nothing's a guarantee, right? We talked about Randy Johnson in 98, but you can have a 80% plus chance of winning 2 games with one starting pitcher, and you only have to sneak out one of the other 3, then you're in good shape.
Yeah.
But if it's a best of 7, guys don't pitch 1, 4, and 7 very often anymore, like Mike Scott was going to.
Now, realism says on most teams that are going to get to the postseason, they've got 2 or 3 good, decent to good starting pitchers, right? Not always true.
Look, the 87 Twins won the World Series with 2 starting pitchers.
They had Kirby Puckett.
That's it. But they had Les Straker starting twice also.
Yeah. I mean, there is no way to explain some years and the postseasons. I was thinking about the Astros. They're playing the Yankees tonight, who were able to win last night with a couple of big guy home runs and that sort of thing. But the wild card Seattle Mariners could have turned this thing. In my opinion, it could have gone 3-0 the other direction. Game 1 was 7-5 in the 9th inning, and the Astros with 2 outs pulled it out with the home run heard around the Seattle fish market, and just an unbelievable game. And for me, that changed a momentum where I'm not a huge believer in momentum in the regular season. It carries a little bit and then it's dead the next day. But in a series where you need to win 3 games, I thought that was the difference between the Astros and the Seattle Mariners. And as it turns out, the Astros won 3 games, I think, by a total of 4 runs. And fortune shines on the winners a lot of times.
It does. And not to pick a scab for Blue Jays fans, but the Mariners could not have been going into that Houston series with more momentum after overcoming that 8-1 deficit in the 6th inning to beat the Jays.
So was it momentum? Was it momentum that put them in a position to win 7-5 or whatever in game 1, and what might have happened? Who's to know?
Yeah, it's in the when the margins are so tiny and just as well as anybody, if the Kansas City Royals had been playing Houston or the Jays or whoever, they've got a puncher's chance at least of winning a 3-game series. But yeah, I mean, I just go back to putting a starting pitcher in, and this talk about picking a scab. putting a starting pitcher in the ninth to try to save the game, immediately when you're on this side of the border, the only thing you think about is going to Steve Rogers in the ninth in 81.
Mm-hmm.
You were busy playing the Dodgers. You were busy walking off Fernando or whatever you did.
Wasn't Fernando, but yeah, thanks for the memory.
But
I think it was
yeah,
Dave Stewart, by the way,
there you go.
who said who was that guy after in his press conference after the game.
Did he really?
I think so.
No,
Yeah.
he didn't. You said who was that guy?
No, no.
You would.
No, I
you
would
would
never
never
do
do
that sort
that.
of thing.
No, definitely not.
I was very
But,
fortunate to get that pitch from his owner.
Well, you know what? Since we're talking about Astros playoff losses that you were part of, tell the story of your walk-off playoff hit.
1981, strike shortened season. It was was it extra innings? Ninth inning?
It was
10th
the
inning?
11th inning.
11th inning. The Dodgers were a very talented team, and we felt equal to them. We thought we could win, and felt when it was all said and done like we should have won. But in game one of that series, I think Fernando did start and whitewashed us. You can straighten me out on bad memories, but anyway,
I lied, by the way. It was the ninth inning.
It was
you
the
got
ninth.
a run on 6 hits off of Fernando, and you were. It was a 1-1 tie going into the bottom of the ninth.
Was it Dave Stewart on the mound?
It was Dave Stewart on the
Yeah.
mound.
So anyway, we get to the
Because Fernando got pinch hit for in the ninth.
yeah, and boy,
Right, that's a whole other thing, right?
I'll bet
Because
that,
I mean, we don't have.
I'll bet that haunted Tommy Lasorda for some time.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that
For a few
anymore
days.
because the pitchers don't hit anymore. But yeah, when that's the time when you have a decision.
But Fernando
Pitchers
could
just-
hit, by the way.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
But Jay Johnstone could not that day.
So anyway, with 2 outs, as I recall, Craig Reynolds came off our bench, nobody on base, as a pinch hitter.
Yep.
And I was in the on-deck circle already, and as he went by with my chest puffed out, I said, "Get on base, I'll drive you in." And Craig got a little bouncing base hit up the middle, and I got something I could handle for some reason and put it in the seats in the Astrodome in right field. And what a cool moment to be put in that position and have it work out. And interviewed by Brian Gumbel on national TV at the end of the game. And, just some of those things that come together, you never think as a kid. I mean, to think something like that is just pure what was his name? Walter Mitty? Walter Mitty.
Yep.
Yeah. That kind of thing.
But you did. I mean, yeah. And hitting home runs, in the Astrodome is real hard. Did you have more power swinging lefty?
Oh, yeah, much more. Yeah, that was my much better side of the plate. And then game 2 comes up, and Denny Walling hits a late 2-run home run, I believe, to win that game for the Astros, and we were up 2-0. And
That was the one in the 11th, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we went out to LA for the 3 games and lost 3 straight. And wow, was that
Scored 2 runs.
Yeah, that was really tough.
Scored 2 runs over 3 games.
Really tough.
Man, so it's 2 years in a row that you guys were up 2-0 in a best of 5 and couldn't close it out. And then you had to wait 5 years to get back to the playoffs.
I'm not at all these ballparks, and I know fans, put up great noise, and I know that the Rogers Center has been rocking and rolling when the Blue Jays won the World Series and all that sort of thing. But from my experience, I had never heard the level of noise that we had in those 2 games in the Astrodome, and then even in the 3 games of the sitting on their hands LA Dodgers fans out in LA. It was phenomenal. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's amazing that you got a chance to be a part of that. One more thing before I let you go, and it goes back to 86. But this is something that does still happen, and we just tend to think about it really matter-of-factly. But you caught 16 innings on that last day in Game 6 with stakes as high as they could possibly be. You're fighting for the season. I mean, at what point do you just get so horribly worn down, or is it just all adrenaline until it's over?
I would say the catching aspect was easy. The over aspect was really difficult. And, honestly, I wanted to be a part of every inning of what was going on, and I was fortunate to be able to be in that position. So I felt no fatigue, nothing like that even plays a part. We were indoors Now, had we been in the heat of Atlanta or St. Louis or, whatever the case may be, it may have been very different. But indoors in the Astrodome, it was not even an issue for me. But it's tough when you take an over with the bat, and that was some really good pitching going on from the Mets. But I think I took a long over in that game, and it's hard to look back and say you didn't do a doggone thing to help this team win.
Well, you did, catching 400 pitches or whatever it was, though.
Well, when it's all said,
running those pitchers.
Yeah, when it's all said and done, we lost, and that's a tough thing. But boy, Billy Hatcher hit a home run to tie that game, I think, in the ninth inning with a towering bomb off the left field foul pole, and I
think it was in like the 13th.
It might have been.
It was in the 14th.
We might have fallen behind an inning or two in the extra innings, and somehow managed to come back. And when the game ended, the guy I considered really our best player, Kevin Bass, was at the plate, and he was a switch hitter who was on his power side, the right side, and I really thought he was going to hit a home run to walk it off to the Astros. At that point, it didn't pan out, but boy, the hopes were high.
Yeah, that was. I remember the Billy Hatcher homer. I don't remember anything else about that game, but 7-6, the Mets won. It was 3-3 going into extra innings, 4-4 after the Billy Hatcher homer.
That's really something.
In the 14th.
3-3 in regulation and go 16 innings. How often would that be given a chance by Las Vegas to have happen?
And lose 7-6, and you never got to come to the plate in that bottom of the 16th inning.
And the crowd cheered.
Now. So I guess to wrap it up, since ostensibly I brought you on to talk about differences in playoff series and stuff, what do you think of, you played in 81, which was the strike year, which was the only expanded playoff season of your career because they did first half, second half, and that's how there was what's now called a division series then. But for the rest of your career, and you played a long time in the major leagues, I know Jerry said it every game, but for the rest of your career, 4 teams made the playoffs, 4 out of 24, 4 out of 26, whatever it was at the time. Now it's 12 out of 30. How does that strike you?
Well, it's all about fairness, right? Not exactly. So
it's about
keeping interest. Toronto this year, it had to be a very exciting finish because there was that carrot hanging out there that said postseason play if you win, right? I hope it was very exciting.
Oh, it was. And as it turns out, even in the old format where there was only one wild card team, the Jays would have had that. But you didn't play with that one either.
Right. But, you can look at the NBA and talk about the number of teams. I think they have 50% or more that go to the postseason, don't they? I don't know exactly.
16 out of 30.
Yeah.
In the NHL too.
Yeah.
It's half the teams.
So they dilute the whole thing. Is it fair? No, it's really not fair, but it's about maintaining interest for as many teams as is reasonable, I would say, if you consider the current state of affairs reasonable, and I think it probably is. I think it's unfortunate, however, when the Dodgers win 111 games and they get dropped. Great fan support in San Diego, so I don't really have a problem there. And the Padres, I love watching teams do well that have great fan support. I have a problem with teams like the Marlins winning the World Series twice as a wild card when there's not great fan support. I do. But in fact, I think it's been since like 2004 since a wild card team won the World Series. But in about a 5-6 year span.
I think one of the Giants ones was.
As a wild card?
Oh, yeah, I think one of them was. The 10 or 12 was a wild
card. For some
card.
reason, my mind said that 4 wild card teams had won the World Series. And I think 2 of those were the Marlins, one was the Angels, and one was the Red Sox. And those all happened between like 98 and 2004. Real tight span of time there. And you're probably right. I'm never going to win a memory game on baseball with you, Mike. But so if the Giants are another team that did that, I'd love for you to look that up. And I don't mean right now.
I'll do it right now.
Yeah, it's been a long time from my memory about a team doing that. Was it fair? Probably not. Was it great that the Red Sox won the World Series after falling behind. I don't know if it was that year or a different year where they fell behind 3-0 and then came back and won.
Yeah, it was that year.
Yeah.
It was '04.
Yeah.
The 14 Giants were a wild card team.
Wild card team. I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Well, I'll never go up and battle with one Mike Wilner, but good memory. It's all in the perspective, I think, because had the Blue Jays gotten themselves through that first series and then moved on and had a chance to go to the World Series, I think that would have been a phenomenal story. In some cases, I don't think it's a great story. And I kind of point to the Florida Marlins. And again,
right.
This year. But
yeah, fairly.
But Philadelphia has a chance to make it happen. You've got the Cardinals out, the Dodgers, who else is out that goes through 162 games and
the Mets had 100 wins, right?
Mets and Atlanta.
Atlanta?
Yeah. The Mets didn't technically win their division because Atlanta did, but the Mets won as many games, 101 games. Yeah, the number of teams that won 100-plus games this year and are out, that's a tough pill.
4 teams won 100 games in the Major League Baseball this year, and only one of them won a playoff round, and that's the Houston Astros. All right, I said last thing, and we've been going forever, but it occurs to me, so I'm going to ask you, when we talk about fairness and 162 meaning something and keeping players or teams involved, you started your career with Cleveland when 2 teams in each league made the playoffs. So, what was it like playing September, August, maybe even some years July? You guys were already out.
Yeah, I didn't know which way you were going to finish that. I was going to say you pointed out the fact that I was with Cleveland and that would have eliminated September from the possibilities. But
right.
Yeah, as a young player, I was still hoping to get in a game and be able to perform It was very different. I didn't have that playoff perspective. I never tasted it. So I never had a chance to kind of have that develop a little bit for me. But it's tough. And I think September can be a real battle for a lot of major league players who are on a team that are simply banished. But I think it's worse for those fans, though. Those fans need something to latch onto. And there's the bottom line for why Major League Baseball is doing what they're doing.
And you're an original Blue Jay, and you're reporting to spring training knowing that it's over, right?
Yeah, when I got the phone call,
yeah, exactly.
I think Neil McCarl was the guy I heard from to inform me that I'd been traded. The trade took place on the day of the expansion draft, and GMs back then were not plugged in with a lot of assistants and all that kind of thing. And they were at the airport traveling and probably felt like I had no need to know about this before morning came. But I got a call from Neil McCarl, and I didn't know the name of the Blue Jays, what they were going to be called. And so when I was asked the question, how do you feel about being traded to the Blue Jays? My reaction wasn't real positive at the time because I didn't even know what he was asking.
Wow, Neil McCarl of the Toronto Star.
Yes,
very cool.
Sir. Yes, sir.
That's how things come full circle.
Yeah.
Well, I've kept you far longer than I thought, than I told you, but it's just because you're so wonderful to talk to, and you have such great insight and memories. But thank you so much. It is so good to catch up with you, and you still got, whether you believe it or not, you still got a lot of fans up here in Toronto, and they are going to be absolutely thrilled to be hearing from you.
Got a lot of folks in Toronto that are still close to my heart, Mike. You right there, obviously. And it was a wonderful 6 years for my wife and me, even though there were no postseasons involved. That was a lot of fun.
And you were part of some big moments. Jose Bautista, 50 homers, some Roy Halladay, special stuff.
Jose Bautista was the best player in the game for a couple of years there. In my book, Roy Halladay was the best pitcher in the game. There were some really good things. And then you look at the seasons late in the time that I was there that Adam Lind and
Aaron
Hill put up. Those were MVP type seasons if it hadn't been for some other guys, going even beyond. It was really something.
I'll never forget walking up to Aaron Hill in his first day in the major leagues and asking him what the difference was between playing in AAA and playing in the big leagues. You'll never remember what he said, but I'll never forget it. And his answer was, The pants are nicer.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's kind of an Aaron Hill response too.
Yeah.
I hear actually somebody told me that he's living in North Houston, up the Woodlands area. I don't know if that's true or not, but
We got to check it out. Get you
the perfect
get you
way
two
to end
together.
our segment, right?
The Woodlands, of course, is where Jameson Tyone is from, and he's
Oh,
starting the
wow.
opener. By the time people hear this, we'll know what's going on with Jameson Tyone. Yeah, it's a great way to end a segment talking about Adam Lind and Aaron Hill. Thank you so much for this, Alan, and can't wait to do it again sometime.
Mike, thanks so much. I'm glad for once in my life I said yes to somebody who requested.
Me too.
Always my man. Thanks.
Just an incredible conversation with an incredible human being. I really, it's difficult to put into words how wonderful Alan Ashby is, how great it was to get to sit beside him in that booth for 6 years. And such a font of knowledge about the game. Alan Ashby's major league career started 50 seasons ago. He's going to hate that I said that, but he made his major league debut in 1973 and was in the big leagues for 17 years. Called it quits after 1989 with the Houston Astros, and we got the privilege of getting to hear him do Jays games for 6 years. That's going to do it for episode 82 of Deep Left Field. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Big thank you to Andy Kindler and to Alan Ashby for joining us. And of course, our technical directors and producers, JP Fozo, Sean Pattenden, Crawford Blair. Most of all, to all of you for listening. Next time we hit the airwaves or whatever this is online, we may well know who's going to be playing in the World Series. And we'll know who to root for against the Astros or the New York Yankees. I don't know if I have a National League preference, but Rob Thompson from Corunna, Ontario, hard by Sarnia, managing the Philadelphia Phillies, it would be pretty cool to see him running the show in the Fall Classic. Deep Left Field drops every Thursday afternoon, rain or shine, off-season or in-season, baseball or no baseball. And we are thrilled to have you along with us, whether this was your 82nd listen or your first or somewhere in between. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week. My name is Mike Wilner. This is Deep Left Field.